Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is April 26, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Bill O'Connor. Where are you calling in from, Bill?
The Cleveland, Ohio area, Jerry. And thanks for having me. It's very much an honor for me.
It's an honor and a pleasure. We met through the Dante Reading Group through Sweeney's Pharmacy.
Yes.
The first question, Bill, is what's the best thing for a human being?
Oh my, love, I suppose, maybe, or the love one has inside, compassion, all those variations on that.
I like that. I get the answer love often, but the love we have inside, that's pretty deep. I like that. Bill, what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
I suppose visually.
Good. It seems as though you're a reader too. Did you grow up a reader?
I did, yes, Jerry. Yeah.
Did you read because your parents were doing it, and then as an example, they were telling you to do it, or on your own?
Pretty much on my own. My mom taught me to read. I come from a fairly large family. I didn't realize it at the time. Everybody in my neighborhood had, at least the number of kids we did. We had 7 kids in 8 years, and I was the second oldest. So, yeah, she taught myself and my older sister at the same time, and just pretty much took off from there. I suppose it was mainly, escape. Liked a lot of, you know, uh, fantasy, I suppose. A lot of fiction when I was a kid.
Yeah. Well, we'll go back into that, but why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, it's probably if you want to call it an advantage, but a cultural advantage that animals have culture, I suppose, but to record uh, what goes on from generation to generation, it just gives us an evolutionary advantage over any other form of creature, I suppose.
But do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented by humans?
Wow. I would say invented.
Wow, that's good. Because so many people say, well, it's survival and it's innate, but I think it could well been invented that we have to collect information.
Oh, I think so, very much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
one of the reasons I say that is, a lot of that collecting and the recording is on. This is how little I really know, but it left side of the brain kind of thing,
yeah.
and it's the thing that takes us out of the moment, you know.
Yeah.
And so to support that, we invent all kinds of things, analogous to, say, biological stuff, but it's just to feed that need of the left side of the brain.
Yeah. That's good. Do thoughts create emotions?
Of course, I think they can, and vice versa. I mean, it's hard to distinguish which is which. Emotions or thoughts. They're all the same, kind of.
Yeah, it's funny because humans invented the words feeling and thinking, but it's really hard to separate them. But do you think thinking is more innate or more invented?
I think it's a state of awareness, but I don't. It's just one of the states.
Yeah.
And do I think it's invented? I don't. I usually don't see words in letters in my mind. So I see lots of images a lot of times, but and I hear sounds, but I don't see words. So when I use the word thinking specifically, it's almost like a string of words where I apply some kind of logic and some kind of time to it, so that there's a logical flow. Um, I know so much about Finnegan's Wake, and when you look at what Joyce did in Finnegan's Wake, where with the exquisite punning that he does, he breaks all that sequencing, and he goes from world to world in different states of awareness. That, I think, is thinking with a capital T. The normal kind of consciousness and awareness that I have is thinking with a small t. It's normal awareness.
Yeah. It's amazing because you really evoked the McLuhan quote about Joyce. He said, James Joyce used the pun as a way of seeing the paradoxical exuberance of being through language.
Wow. I was doing a little research on you, and I noticed how much you really like Marshall McLuhan,
Yeah.
and you even were interviewed by his grandson, I think. And I listened to part of that interview. It was very, very nice. But just by the strangest of coincidence, within the last month, I'm in a small meditation group, a Buddhist meditation group, and I met the husband of one of the people in it. He is very much a Marshall McLuhan aficionado. I think he even had him as a teacher, and he certainly had his son as a teacher. But he told me about the Joyce connection with Marshall McLuhan. I didn't know it. I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an astounding how
Yeah.
much. But yeah, I first started seeing because I do a lot of punning. Just simple punning that drives my wife nuts. She loves puns, but she doesn't necessarily love my puns. And they are so. It's such. I mean, they're wonderful because they are exactly that. They can take somebody out of a feeling. They can
Yeah.
take somebody of conversational flow. They can disrupt the conversational flow, but at the same time, they can bring in a greater awareness. And I really think because of meditation, just looking at the things that happen to my mind in meditation, I really think that it's a different state of mind. It's a different, and we do not properly appreciate. We call it punning as if it's, a castaway, something to be discarded. When in effect, everything is a pun.
It's all language is metaphorical. That was really good, Bill, because it gets a little complex. Seeing the paradoxical exuberance, so seeing this paradox, which is exuberant of being, just
Yes.
that's life through language. So he says it. So you really anticipated the next question in a way. Can humans think without language?
Yeah, that's a good one, Jerry. I would just say, what happens, like there's this wonderful book, and I'm sure you're aware of it, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain.
Yeah.
And in it, she has you do these exercises, and one of the exercises is to draw something upside down, and then you take your drawing and you turn it right side up and you compare it to the original.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how close they can be. Close enough. Here's a great work of art. Here's my line drawing of it. And when I do the drawings, when I'm in that state, I'm in a different state of awareness.
Totally.
So if you want to call that thinking, I would say it's again a part of that capital T thinking, that I'm in a different state when I'm there.
Yeah. It's a really good answer.
Oh,
I
thanks.
appreciate that because it's sussing that all words are metaphorical. We want words to work. T.S. Eliot said, "When I talk to you, I've got to use words." But there are other ways to communicate. We can use gesture, eye contact, whatever. But it's an interesting thing. So, how would you fill in the blank here, Bill? I don't know what I think until I
Do it.
do it. That's action. Yeah, because McLuhan said, I don't know what I think until I say it. And Joan Didion said, I don't know what I think until I write it.
Oh, yeah.
But that's interesting. Now, Chomsky says that language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is.
Yeah, I
What do
agree
you
with that.
Yeah, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, one of my favorite poets is from Northeast Ohio. His name's George Bilgier, and he's about the same age as you and I. And he writes about muscle cars. And he writes about divorce and the experience of being an older father, which is very similar to being a grandfather, like I am. And when he says words, when he uses them, it evokes something entirely different in me than to say when my son does, who's from a different generation.
Yeah.
And one of the illusions that language and words create is that we're understood one to the other, And so when do we know it breaks down? I encounter that with my grandkids quite often. They take things literally, as do I, you know. And so it's not until there's a communication break that I'm aware of that I can do something about it. Most of the time, I'm under the illusion that I'm being understood.
But I mean, when that breaks down, what do you do? Is there any sort of strategy you have or plan or
Oh gosh, Jerry, that's
what?
so good. My wife and I are both aging, and our hearing is going in some regards.
Yep.
So the break happens all the time.
Yeah.
And the emotional reaction most of the time is irritation on my part and amusement on her part. She's amused when she doesn't understand. But a lot of times I hear, like we're watching a movie, let's say, and so she will break the flow of the movie by asking me, what did they just say? Right.
Right.
And you know what happens when that happens? Whatever happens while she's asking me that is gone.
You miss it. And
And
they could be explaining it while you're talking. Yeah.
so then I am irritated with that. And then I explain to her why I'm so irritated with that, and more gets lost. Right. So if you're asking for the honest answer, it depends on who and what are the
Right.
circumstances. And
Right.
it's always an emotional reaction.
Very
It
good.
can be amusement. It can be, but more often than not, it's fear based.
Yeah. Tell me, just to go back a step, what's George's last name, your favorite
Oh,
poet?
Bilgier. He's one of Mary Oliver's, another one. Bilgier is spelled Bilgere.
And the other poet you like is who?
Oh, Mary Oliver. I like quite a few of them, but Mary
Mary
Oliver's,
Oliver.
yeah,
Good.
you know Mary Oliver.
We're going to get into poetry, so that was good. So, do you think generally, and again, it's there's context that it really matters the context, but in general, your observations of humans, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Feeling.
Yeah. These are two questions from 1950 by Alan Turing. Is thinking a function of the soul?
If you include it as one of the ways of being, if you think of the soul as, say, from you could call it from a Christian perspective or from a Jungian perspective, but it's the connection with, the way I look at it, as the divine within, and
Yeah.
it's more interested in being and becoming. And thinking, if you look at thinking as part of that, but most of the time when I'm thinking, it's taken me out of the now.
Yeah.
And so I would say is part of the shadow of the soul
Ah.
or the self.
Thinking is more part of the shadow than the soul, you're saying.
Yeah.
That's heavy. Yeah. We're in a young reading group.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah. I'll tell you about it. You should join us. It's really a good group. It's Duncan and and a few other people. It's pretty small, but that was good. Is the shadow? Yeah. So the other Turing question is: can machines think?
Well, yeah, I guess essentially, you're asking whether or not it's a human faculty, or is it a faculty of machine logic? You
Yeah.
know, so far I would say the way we define it, it's a faculty of human beings. Turing's test is, I think, one of the tests that he's credited with is, can you tell if it's a machine response that you're getting?
Yeah.
You know, and human beings have turned. I mean, I'm thinking of Skinner. Trying to treat other creatures as black boxes.
Yeah.
And program them. And so, can we be programmed to respond? One of my favorite psychologists is Seligman. And Seligman wrote a book called Learned Optimism. His studies were in how to recreate depression, if you will, in animals. And he figured, oh gosh, if we can teach. The way he did it with those horrible experiments, where he had a bunch of dogs that he put into pens that they couldn't escape, with an electric field on the base of it. Right, he'd send
Yeah.
a signal, then he'd send the shock, and they couldn't leave. So after a bit, he'd send a signal and they'd just lay there. So he
Yeah.
put in the control dogs, and they'd lower the fence, till it was very low. Put these control dogs in who hadn't been shocked. He'd do the signal, and he'd send the shock, and the control dogs just jump right out of the pen. The dogs who had been conditioned just lay there. So is that thinking? Do you see what I mean? When you can, it's a horrible thing, and
Yeah.
but he thought, oh gosh, if we can do that, we can teach ourselves to be optimistic too. We don't have to teach ourselves just to be depressive.
Yeah.
And so, is it programmatic on how to have a more joyful life? Can that be taught in a program? And if so, is that a cultural thing? On how to do that? Is a culture a machine? Do we want to call that? And is that what the culture does? Is that thinking? Because it certainly has its values, and it certainly is going to outlive you or me, and it's certainly going to replicate itself, and it's going to do all these analogs to biology. So I would say, yeah, machines can think, if you put machines as culture.
It's pretty heavy. McLuhan has a book, Culture is Our Business, and you bringing in the word culture in the question, can machines think, was really good, because most people have gone, depends on what you mean by thinking. They can do machine thinking. Can they do human thinking? But you shifted it as, is culture a machine? I love that. That's you win, Bill, because the whole point of these series is to invent new questions. That's the Irish, right? They go, hey, you Irish people, you answer questions with questions. And the guy goes, we do, eh?
Give me an example.
I like, my favorite is this a private fight, or can anyone join in? So, Bill, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I think I'd have to say meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. Because, it's basically, there isn't, but I got that question from Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning lasts, and happiness doesn't necessarily last.
Oh,
so
yeah. It does depend on how you define happiness, though, Jerry.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people usually go, well, happiness leads to meaning, meaning leads to happiness. So, again, it's all these words and how we have our collective hunch, what we think
Yeah,
they mean in our commonality. Like we
yeah.
have a so does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness
Oh,
there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
oh wow. Uh, well, let's say that we're having a real dialogue and that we're really learning from each other, which is certainly happening on my end, you know.
Totally.
And so if that's happening, then we're co-creating a new
Yeah.
form of consciousness for both of us, you
Yeah.
know. And and the only reason we do that, like we talk about having this excess capacity as human beings, in terms of our brains, and and the only reason we have that excess capacity is because of our culture. Again, it's
Yeah.
the secretion of capacity over tens of thousands of generations of. I mean, and the pandemic was a great example that we saw how little we really needed from the economy. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's like, oh my God. And of course, none of us produce anything that we use or consume.
Yeah.
It's just all out there for us. So it's the culture that's given us all this stuff. And so, is it the human being, the individual, that's creating more consciousness? I think artists do. I
Yeah.
think the designers, engineers,
Yeah.
scientists, and all that can happen within oneself. When I put it together in my mind, what Einstein meant, I've just become part of the Einstein consciousness.
Totally. Totally. I contain multitudes. We're all like one in a
And
way.
so all those forms of consciousness exist for all of us all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So
No, it's
where does it get
amazing.
created? You know?
Yeah. It's amazing what you said because bringing up the pandemic was like all of a sudden I walked down the street and there were no cars and
Yeah.
animals and the birds were flocking and there was no air pollution. I was like, wait a minute, this is a miracle.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the cars start coming back and there's air
Yeah.
pollution and it's like, oh my God, now we're back. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Well, I mean, now you're talking about the science of it. For one thing, the science would say a speed of light, but because we have to do all these things in order to create the thought. But a lot of it is electrical, but a lot of it is chemical,
Yeah.
And so, where does thought come from? Is it the electrical impulses or is it the chemical impulses?
Yeah.
We're biochemical computing creatures,
Yeah.
and then so like we all talk about our guts. We have that stuff that's happening in our gut or our heart that's telling us that things aren't right, you know, and that so when is it really a final thought? Is it when we
Yeah.
actually are taking it into action or saying it or writing it or whatever it is? So that's kind of, again, gets back to what is a thought, you
Yeah.
know?
It's good because again, what we're doing is what McLuhan liked is then question metaphors. And the gut thing is a great analysis because that's what I usually tell people is they go, well, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know. And I says, well, just go with your
Your
gut.
gut.
Go with your intuition, your impulse, all that left brain that, no, not left, all your right brain stuff, your guess. Like Lily Tomlin said, reality is just a collective hunch.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's like just whatever your hunch is, because they think, to go back to what you just said, they think once they say it, then it's on a tape, and that's what your answer is. And,
Yes.
and my mom said years ago when I says, "Mom, I want to interview you," she says, "Well, everything I say today, I might say differently tomorrow." I says, "That's all
Of
right."
course.
But it is a phenomenon that we have this taping mechanism. Then we think, oh, well, this person said that. And then, oh, are you going to hold me to that? Well, you said it, but I'm not going to hold you to it. That's what it's hard, because some people think, one guy said, I want to see you nail someone before you nail me to interview. And I says, well, I'm not out to nail anybody. But if you say, I don't know, I want people to know, that's totally valid.
Sure.
And my favorites was just recently a woman, because I have those more questions on occasion. She said, the word more doesn't function in your question. and I love that, because it is sort of bullshitty. Are we more thinking or more feeling? I mean, I know it's wide range, but it's more like what your hunch is. So that gut metaphor was great. So going to a poet, Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. Now, my question is basically, what new tool do you suggest? Or what new tool do you gravitate towards? Now, I open some of these questions with cue quotes. It doesn't mean you have to apply them. The basic question is what tool do you gravitate towards? You can add new to it, or you can say, well, you mean to dismantle the master's house. So you put the questions into the context you want.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to look at that that quote too, because that's really powerful. And I would say, and I'm gonna go with my reaction to that dismantle the Lord's house using the
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because somebody asked me what my philosophy was based on relatively recently, and I said I don't have a philosophy, it's more like a spirituality.
Yeah.
Right. And so luckily I stumbled into a group of guys who were studying this particular book. It's called The Spirituality of Imperfection. And the moment I heard that phrase, spirituality of imperfection, I thought, that's my philosophy.
Yeah.
So how does that help me dismantle the Lord's house?
It's the master's house, but it's interesting.
The master's house.
But it's interesting what you heard, Bill. The woman who said it is Audre Lorde. And the Lord is a master. Isn't that
of course?
Because the Lord and the master are the same. But it is. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
No, that's I'll have to think even deeper about it because of that.
Yeah.
But so in this culture, it teaches me I have to be perfect. I am not surprised. I was really intimidated to come on and be interviewed by you. I don't know who's listening or who would even care, but I look at your bio, look what you've done. I thought, man, why is he even interested in talking to me? And I have no problem if I have a different thought than what I expressed here today. Yeah. Because I am trapped, as everybody else is in this culture, into this whole thing about being perfect.
Yeah.
And F that, you know what I mean? I'm just going to try to be whatever I am in the moment is as good as it's going to get from me. Yeah. And so one of the dismantlings, I suppose, is to, instead of having a philosophy, is to have a spirituality that is not. I was at one time a modern atheist. Then I became a classic atheist. And the difference between the two is a modern atheist doesn't recognize God. Okay. Doesn't recognize that, has no interest in studying what that might be to that individual. A classic atheist recognizes that there is a power for them, whether they like it or not. Self or shadow, whether they like it or not. Archetypes or religion, whether they like it or not. And so recognizing what is the thing that is driving me is God, shall we call it? God is a verb, right? Yeah. So I have to recognize what those old things are driving me to thinking I have to be perfect. Yeah. That I have to compete. There's like there some real tough things that become our gods in this culture is fear of not having enough,
Yeah.
fear of missing out, and fear of what other people think. And if anybody adheres to any of those things, guess what their God is? Whatever that fear is at the moment.
Duh. That's it.
You know, so I like the idea of making things transparent. You
Yeah.
know, and so those are three transparent tools that I use. I was like, okay, I've got fears, and I have to do some deep digging on them. And where do they come from? Well, it's the same place everybody else gets theirs.
Yeah.
It's church, it's school, it's sports teams, uh, it's got to have more. Sometimes I call myself a recovering moron because I just need to have more. You know?
I'm a recovering moron.
Yeah.
That's a good term. You made that up yourself?
Yeah.
That's a good one, Bill. No, I mean, just experiencing your input at the Dante group was enough. I mean, I said, like, dude, I want to interview you. Because see, my thing is just to talk to people, and it just gives us a format that to use this script that I have of questions. So, what new toy do you suggest? You handled
Oh,
the tool. You handled the tool one really good, Bill. That was really thorough. I loved it. It also evoked, let me tell you who else evoked, you might know George Lakoff, because he said, like, in order for the Occupy movement to work, you have to use the old tools and invent new ones. You don't abandon. So you were like, well, there's the modern atheist and there's a classic atheist. So you try to get the big picture. But just in general, someone said to me, "Well, what about a toy?" I said, "Well, that's fine too." So I added, "What new toy do you suggest?" As though a toy is different than a tool. Well, not really, but you know,
oh well, again, this would be one of those kind of things, moments where I would feel really intimidated because of what you've done with that art festival, that film festival, and using those toy cameras as repurposed. So all of a
yeah,
sudden now I realize I've stepped into a completely different playground when I'm talking to somebody about toys. My personal toy, and it happened to me before I even discovered it, and it happened because I I thought when I discovered Joseph Campbell, it was like looking at the face of God, the voice
yeah,
of God, the persona of God, and then I realized he was dead, and he
yeah,
told this story about this group of uh, Western ministers and theologians visiting Japan, and they went to a Shinto ritual, and they were asking him, well, what's your theology? What's your catechism and all this kind of stuff? And he said, theology, catechism, we dance.
oh, nice.
Yeah, isn't that nice? And so when I discovered dancing, and there are an infinite number of forms of dancing, and they're so humbling because I do not have
Yeah,
natural grace.
yeah.
Dancing is broken walking. Actually, it's more highly stylized walking.
Well, that's
And
both are great. It's broken walking or stylized walking. Yeah,
that is taking your own body as a tool, as a toy, and then doing it with a partner. And then some of my favorite dance forms are accessible to everyone, that
yeah,
are, they're old, ancient forms of dance that came out of royal dances in France and then got passed down across the cultures, and they became folk dances. And everybody does them. Barbara Ehrenstreit, I think was what her name was sociologist. She wrote Dancing in the Streets, and she
yeah,
talked about in the Middle Ages when priests forgot their Latin, and it was all mumbo jumbo to them, and they scandalized the learned theologians when they discovered they were leading dances in the churches. That's how they
woo,
did their rituals. And so, you think about, oh, wow, they danced in church.
it's
That's a
amazing.
toy.
That is a great toy. See, people wouldn't think of that as a toy. It does. It's like it's not called a toy, but indeed the key to dance is playfulness. And there's a great saying that goes, if you can't say it, sing it. If you
Yeah.
can't sing it, dance it.
Dance it.
And
Yeah.
then my favorite is James Brown. I've got a move that tells me what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a great lyric writing.
Yeah.
I've got a dance move that tells me what to do. Well, dances don't talk, but he says it tells me what to do.
Yeah.
Like I've got a move. I mean, yeah, I was really impressed. But did you pick up dance later, or did you start
Yeah.
when you were a kid?
Oh no, I didn't start dancing until I went through the trauma of divorce. And when I say trauma, I mean I'm good friends with the mother of my children now, and I'm good friends with her husband. But there's still an open wound quality. That trauma,
Yeah,
that original
yeah,
Greek meaning of it, and dance. And when I'm in a traumatic spot with anything, including those fears or whatever, there's much darker, deeper things than that.
yeah,
That to get out of that, because it takes me into this timeless stuff,
yeah.
timeless negative stuff. Dance takes me into the moment, and so
That
I discovered it when I was going through a divorce.
that's heavy. Be here now. So, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Sleeping.
Nice. I get that answer. Okay. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They
Uh,
broadcast and detect the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why? No, they broadcast the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about the invention.
yeah.
So Marshall's question was, and I asked you, why do we humans still ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us? And you know what I mean by artists, like you said it earlier, painters, poets, writers, meaning filmmakers, all the arts. They're broadcasting them. Why do we ignore them broadcasting these hidden psychic effects to us?
Well, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I would say it's because our religion is out of sync. Like if you go to most cultures, there's a cultural synchrony between the religion, let's call it the arts, the science, the uh, politics, and we have not been able to move. We take uh, our our spiritual stuff. It says generally from the Christ, right? We take it as literal without understanding how metaphoric it is.
Yeah.
And we don't try to, like there was a wonderful encyclical by the Catholic religion in the 60s, Vatican II, where they said, we're going to honor, there's nothing wrong with the great religions of the world. And they did it out of a deep, regret about their part of the Shoah, of the Holocaust, And so Hinduism's okay, and Buddhism's okay, and native religion's okay. And then they promptly retreated from that instead of joining in this great effort of Christians with other religions and the deep, deep things that we share in a religious way. And I don't mean religious from a perspective of even ritual. I'm just talking about the relink to the experience of the awe of being alive.
Yeah.
And so we're disconnected at so many fundamental levels that if I had to lay the blame anywhere, it's the fact that we were deeply invested in fear of hell, fear of damnation.
Yeah.
So we don't liberate ourselves from that kind of stuff. And so so we just want more,
Yeah.
and we want it faster.
Wow. So do artists have a moral obligation?
Well, let's talk little m moral. We're all moral creatures. We cannot not be. That's how we make choices. Do we share a morality? And does is a is there some aspect of expression that an artist has that they cannot suppress, that they have to express? And in that regard, they have a moral compunction to express it, whether I like it or not. And
Right.
you know,
You're
and so
saying they have a moral obligation to themselves to be true to that. But
yes.
if it's like Louis Buñuel in his film Los Olvidados, he has the Mexican hoodlum kids kicking the blind wino, a homeless person. Now, to me, I love Buñuel, but that's like dangerous because it's almost like is he saying that's the way it is? We have to accept it, or we're saying, isn't this horrible? He's not really, he's just sort of like telling you about this. Do we want to be told about this?
Well, does anybody, like, let's say that that's some kind of thing that came out of his vision, that he's never witnessed it, he never participated in it, right?
Yeah.
We don't even want to know reality from people. We want them to suppress their truths of what really happened to them.
Right. We want that. We don't, yeah, we suppress that. We don't even allow them. So it's like Will Smith doing the slap. Everybody condemned him, including me. I was like, dude, get it together. But there was something in him. And I just read unrelated, Leo McCarey, who directed the Marx Brothers, uh, was going up to the stage to get his Oscar, and Billy Wilder tripped him. Now, what's the difference? I mean, Will Smith didn't really hit the guy hard, and it wasn't polite and all that. He should have not done it, but he didn't hurt Chris Rock. He sort of pulled back. And what was the difference between, we laugh at Billy Wilder tripping Leo McCarey. That's funny. But is it that much different? He was jealous.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'm not trying to rationale it, but I'm just saying it's interesting what you said because you flipped it. See, here's what most people go, yes. Do artists have a moral obligation? They go, yes, we all have a moral obligation. But you put it into a context, well, they have a moral obligation to themselves instead of saying, well, because there's other artists that are hard to take, like Pasolini. There's these, the literature that's hard to take. It's like, wow, I don't like violent films. But, is it so you put it in a different context, which is really healthy for me to hear.
Oh, you're so complimentary. I really appreciate it, Jerry. I think there's a moral obligation a lot of times that we suppress our own
Yeah,
horrible stories,
yeah,
because, like the audience, the, the dialogue partners have to
yeah,
be prepared for the results of the dialogue, whatever that comes from, and,
yeah.
and I think there's a moral obligation, and um, I don't think that's a shared understanding of moral obligation.
It also evokes Alice Walker. She said, "Yes, mother, I can see you are flawed. You have not hidden it. That's your greatest gift to me."
Oh yeah, that's nice.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Um, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Uh, well, I think people are born liberal or conservative, or I
Wow.
should say, they're and they're born conservative and liberal, and so there are some ideas that are frightening to me, that are old, and some
Yeah.
ideas that are new, that are frightening. and there are
Right.
some ideas that are old that are liberating.
Yeah.
And like I am just discovering the thinking of Plato and the Republic, and as I'm discovering it, I'm seeing how it underpins everything in our culture. Right, that is
Yeah.
frightening to me
Yeah.
because of the. But there's also one of the things that he talked about was the inherent goodness of people that
Yeah.
did not like I'm a Pelagian heretic. Pelagius. If you're familiar with Pelagius,
No,
but
tell me, what is it?
well, Pelagius was a Celt that was in. He was a Christian Celt in Rome at the same time as Augustine, and uh, Augustine's got that whole notion of inherent badness of human beings, the original sin,
Uh-huh.
and Pelagius was this big, handsome Celt that everybody liked, and all the women liked, and he was preaching original goodness. And he said, "Have these people never seen or held a human baby? How can
Right.
they preach original badness?"
Yeah.
Well, Augustine came hunting his head, and it was much more of a uh, boon to religion to have us all believe we're born originally bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something Plato said, but never got incorporated. That's an old idea I really like.
Yeah. But that's like, how could you say, I was raised Roman Catholic too, like you. And it's like, how can you say a kid's born with original sin? It's like, that's when the kid has no sin.
That's right. It's as close as perfection as we're going to get.
That's it.
And,
But you're saying Plato was preaching inherent goodness or inherent badness?
goodness.
Goodness. Oh, I see. That's good. Yeah. So, Bill, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, I can, but I'm not going to share it.
Okay. So, do you think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, blessing.
Tell me somebody, just briefly, within your immediate family who had an impact on you, was like a role model, and then someone outside your immediate family, same thing, sort of a role model, had an impact on you. Just briefly, what was that specific impact?
Well, yeah, and I'm going to take the perspective of role model as being a positive thing
Yeah, it can
rather
be.
than a role model of what not to be, because I
Well,
had some of those too.
yeah.
And uh, uh, right now, my the brother who is 18 months younger than me is a role model for me, very much so.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm still learning from him. I think I'm a role model for him too. It's a true dialogue, where we make each other a better person.
Yeah.
That's when the dialogue is based on love and not power.
Yeah.
And so yeah, one of the things he's taught me, he's a convert to the Jehovah's Witnesses,
Yeah.
and they don't talk politics. They don't talk about politics because it's divisive.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, because my family is both arch conservative and somewhat probably liberal to progressive. We have those members in the family too, which I would probably fall into that category. But so like, how how do you maintain a dialogue? Because I have friends who I've known since I was 4, 3 guys that we grew up together. They're all on the other side of the political fence, and so how do we maintain a
Right.
dialogue, and
Yeah.
and how do we even create one because of the divisiveness? So my brother is very much a role model for me for that.
That's good.
Uh, yeah, and then at the same time, one of those friends is he's like a brother, very much a role model. And one of the things I suggested that we do is study history together, if
Yeah.
you will. And I suggested a book I had read about. I hadn't read it yet. It's huge. It's called Crucible of War. the 7 Years War, the 7 Year War, and as the French and Indian War as well. It's wonderful, and
Yeah.
it recasts the American Revolution and recasts our history in a completely different way. And so it allows us to have an open dialogue about something that is meaningful to both of us, if you will.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
No, that you answered it well. That was good. So you said you raised Roman Catholic like I was, and then you went into Eastern philosophy, similar to me. I've gravitated towards them. The question is, do you pray?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody asked me, I have a spiritual director, and so she asked me, well, what do you pray to? It's above my pay grade. There's so many great prayers,
Yeah.
that, like, there's a prayer that's known as the prayer of St. Francis. It is not St. Francis prayer,
Yeah.
but it's part of the myth of it that adds to it. But it goes, one translation goes like this: Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. Despair, hope. Darkness, light. Sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is dying to this moment we are born into eternal life with you. Amen.
Oh,
Now,
that
that's
is,
just one translation of it. It's a wonderful translation, isn't it? Because if you want to know how to have a good life, right? That and it all I don't have to look outside where there's hatred. I can just easily look inside.
yeah.
There's some names you can name for right now that we both know that would trigger me into this
Yeah.
abject hatred. And where do I find love within to counter that? Because I carry those resentments and that hatred inside, that negative demonic energy that really screws my life up. And
Yeah.
those people aren't feeling it. I am.
Exactly. Hey, look at you anticipated the next questions really well with your what you said. And I've never had anyone, I mean, in 40 years, I go, do you pray? No one's actually told me a prayer that they said. And I love it because I like that. Prayers are just like mantras of words. If you
Oh,
can,
absolutely.
it's amazing. That was really beautiful. I want to learn that prayer. And the question is funny because you almost dabbled in it. If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I read this one really good, because first, let me just say that I heard this. I really liked it. I don't ever have to worry about being judged by God, because there is going to be a lineup of people who have questions for the Almighty that are going to go on forever, that I don't have to worry about any of it. Right. So I look at I don't look at anything supernatural. I look
Yeah.
at it as an emergence
Yeah.
of the moment. Which is what, when I say it's a verb, it comes from a Germanic word, God does, that meant, they think, to offer. When the Germans were Christianized, and of course it would make sense. You're teaching them about Christ dying on a cross and all that kind of stuff for our sins, etc. So it means to offer. So what does that mean to me? How do I actually have God emerge in my life then? What's God as a verb then? Well, it's, what can I be of service to the world?
Yeah. That was beautiful. It evoked two great things. One is um, a comedian cartoonist about 2 months ago. I says, what do you want God to say to you? He says, looks like we made a mistake. You're going back.
Reincarnation's a great belief.
Right. Yeah, I only believe in reincarnation in one of my past lives. But this is this is funny because 80% of people, almost 90, go, you did a good job. That's what they want God to say to them. And it's not a bad, it's just interesting. I like to be a pattern recognizer. It's like if one question I ask is answered one way by 90% of the people. That's fine. I'm not saying that's the right way.
Right,
It's
right.
it's an interesting pattern how some questions elicit this. But the thing about God being a verb, which you said earlier, I wanted to interject, I forgot, was that's what Bucky Fuller says. He says,
Hmm.
I seem to be a verb.
Oh,
I seem
wow.
to be a verb. And indigenous American Indians, I was told, have no nouns. They only have verbs.
Oh, wow.
So I love that whole idea of verb. So here's the question you anticipated. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, I think is there evil in our culture? Is like if if we think about the language that we're written in, DNA, right? As
Yeah,
individual human beings were written in this language. It's encoded. Do we
yeah,
encode evil? And you can go back and prehistory. There's a mummified person they found in the Austrian Alps as the glaciers melted. And you're familiar with him, I'm sure. Ötzi, I think is how you
yeah,
pronounce it. And
yeah.
they found all these artifacts all over Ötzi of all these cultural artifacts. They had even, they think, moss that they think was used as an antibiotic, all these manufactured tools, such that he could not have done it himself. And they figure that it had to come from at least the Italian peninsula, and probably much wider. There are trails across trading trails across the Americas that existed before Europeans came here. So the
Right.
market economy existed,
Yeah.
trade existed. Capitalism did not necessarily exist, and there are lots of things that we can say are definitely evil that comes as part of that package. That does not mean capitalism per se is
Right.
necessarily what we have. We have not regulated it properly.
Right.
And so I think that it it turns people into evils. So then almost everybody talks about psychopaths and sociopaths.
Yeah.
If they have not discovered their own inner psychopath or their own inner sociopath, they have not looked very hard.
Yeah.
And so we have these people who we create in our culture. If you read about some of the background of some of the psychopaths and sociopaths, horrific.
Yeah.
And that's the fact that most of us come from these horrible circumstances ourselves, that
Yeah.
we come out as good. That's the miracle, that
Yeah.
most of us come out good.
Yep.
So do I think it exists? Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I think, do
Yeah.
we create it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people say we're all capable of evil, but some people go, nope, there's evil people. And, I mean, it's like I'm just giving these two choices. You sussed it out and gave me a much bigger picture, which I appreciate it. And it goes along with the next question, which is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, Bill, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I would say that I think he's foolish,
Yeah.
because how do you do anything about uh, hatred or whatever you want to say an enemy takes you to? I mean, you could say uh, somebody that you want to eliminate, or you can say as somebody that's a competitor. There's lots of variations, shades of what an
Yeah.
enemy means. But if you don't acknowledge that state in yourself, you're never going to move out of it. It's always
Yeah.
going to be there in an active shadow way. It's the
Yeah.
way I look at it. So I think he's being foolish about that.
Yeah. But how would you advise, like if one of your kids came to you and they said, somebody's bullying me, they're like my enemy, how would you advise someone to deal with an enemy?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think first I have to model whatever it is that I'm going to suggest to somebody. And so one of the paradoxical things that I've learned is that um, it's not up to me to forgive somebody because it was never up to me to judge them to begin with. That's
Wow.
above my pay grade too, you know.
Yeah.
And so that's how I turn people into enemies. Do I do it all the time? So but if I use this, this thing that says the world's not just yin and yang or yin and yang or whatever you want to call it. It's not just either or, it's both and.
Both and yeah.
So that I have to really look at what is my part in this thing that I've needed to turn this person into an enemy. What do I keep alive? And like we use the word resentment, and it came into the English language the same time. It's a French word, French origin, and this is what I think it originally meant. Ressentir, to feel something again. It also meant to feel something as a friend feels. In other words, it's empathy.
Wow.
And a friend in those days meant something different than it does now. It meant somebody who was a powerful person. It was somebody who could give me stuff, that kind of thing. But let's just say it's a friend as we mean it now.
Yeah.
Well, I have to see what that other person, what did I do in this situation? It might be nothing more than something that I want to see myself as always good.
Yeah.
As eternally pure, as perfect. I need to see that. And in order to see that, I need to have somebody that's a bad guy.
Yeah. That's good. Back to American Indians, indigenous say your enemy is your best teacher.
Oh yeah.
And your Be Here Now really inspires me. That whole philosophy of living in the present. Ram Dass wrote the book Be Here Now. He said, I'm having a real hard time loving George Bush. And it's like, fill in the blank. I'm having a real hard time loving Putin. It's like this whole thing about hate. I used to ask, is hate culturally learned? Like, are we hardwired to hate? Are humans, is it in us innately to hate?
Well, if hate means feel violent antipathy towards another human being, yes,
Yeah.
we're wired for that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But do we want to hang on to it? That's the difference.
Right.
And so, like all these are, that's where I think the Buddha was the number one psychologist of all time. Is all of that what we've discussed? Most of it is just suffering, and it's self-imposed. Like Dante. We read that together, and Dante had all of his enemies placed into Inferno, right? And then the ones he was kind of given a pass, he put them into Purgatorio, right? Well, he had to maintain that Inferno inside himself in order to even create it outside.
Yeah.
And never let people out of it, never forgive. That's a hell of a lot of suffering to maintain on one's own.
I've got to skip to this question I usually ask at the end because it's so appropriate right now. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist, or one creates, not you, Bill, but one creates what one resists. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. and James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. and then Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So, I mean, suss this out because you've sort of touched on it, but one creates what one resists. Is that what you're saying, or is that something different?
Um, well, like, uh, I, I think I create my own suffering. I don't create my own pain necessarily, but I create my own suffering.
Yeah.
And so, this how am I going to react? You asked me, what do I think about when what do I fear when I go to bed at night? Or I forget what exactly the question was.
What do you worry about when
Worried
you go
about.
to bed? Yeah.
Yeah. So I have sleep apnea, and I have to use a sleep apnea machine, which is somewhat new to me. Uh, but I'm also a high energy guy, but I can also do crazy things where which I won't go into, but that could almost get me killed. It almost has gotten me killed. And I have created my own suffering based on the things that I'm fearful of, the things that I want. Buddha said it's all based on craving and fear. And I don't know which came first. It's definitely one of those chicken and egg kind of questions. Does
Right.
a craving come to cover up the fear, or does it come to relieve the fear, or whatever the thing is?
Yeah.
So I really do think that I create my own suffering, and I say that very cavalierly,
Yeah.
and but it's and formulaically, if you will, but I think it's true. And so I don't know how to give a better example of
Well,
let's
no, that's
say.
a good example. And it's, I think, what part of the solution is, or how you approach is that you address it and you talk about it. If you repressed it and didn't say anything, I mean, to me, you're being extremely honest here and just laying your cards on the table. And you do that to your friends or whatever, but if you held it all in, it would be a way of not dealing with it. So I think that's the process.
There's more to it than that, though. That it has to be made aware of, but then I also have to accept it.
You have to
I have
accept
to
it.
I have
Yeah.
to accept the reality of whatever the pain is. Say somebody inflicts a pain
Yeah.
on me, and it's interesting you said Will Smith, and uh, because I've been on both sides of that, of the desire for that or the
Yeah.
fear of that,
Yeah.
and so yeah, like it's all that kind of stuff. I didn't see it because I wasn't watching. I wasn't watching the Academy Awards that night, but I think of it as Will Smith had his role in his mind, say the one he won the Oscar for, the protective father,
Yeah.
and and he might have seen a look that he misinterpreted on his wife's face that said, "I need," because I think he was
Yeah.
laughing, and now I need to kick in this inner thing
Yeah.
that shows her that's not how I'm not laughing or whatever. So
Yeah.
he's a real good actor, and he kicked that role in, and he got into that role, and
Yeah.
he went up and executed that role. That's all he was doing,
Yeah.
and
But
that's
then when he returned to his seat and he yelled, "Don't do that." We knew, most people, I mean, a lot of people thought that was scripted. That was just like Billy Wilder tripping the guy almost.
right.
But then when he started yelling, we go, that's not acting. Because it's almost like we could tell the whole, gazillion people watching, like, he's really, that was really real. But that was amazing. You really evoked one of the key things my sister taught me. She said one of the keys to a successful relationship is how you deal with what you don't like about the other person. The how. So he didn't like that, so he did the attack dog. He could have said later, tweeted, or did other ways of how. And then I said, well, that's like sweet tolerance. Well, I don't like how this person does this, so I will sweetly tolerate it. And my friend goes, nope, it's not sweet tolerance. That's implying what they're doing is wrong or bad. And then I says, well, it's adapting to what they do you don't like. You adapt to it. Friend said, nope, it's not adapting. It's the word you use. It's accepting. It doesn't mean you have to condone it and say, I like it. But if you can accept that they do that, then maybe you can have a successful relationship, you know?
Yeah, for sure. But you think about all that he did and the suffering that he created for himself.
Yeah.
And it becomes just an amusing anecdote for most of us, but he created
Yeah.
a lot of suffering for himself with that.
Yep.
The pain of whatever he felt, whenever he felt it, maybe it was being caught laughing at a joke told by somebody at his wife's
About his
expense.
wife. Yeah.
Maybe that was the painful experience of being caught, not having the
Yep.
joke told, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but that's getting into somebody else's psyche, but that's how I create my own suffering from all that stuff.
But I do like you accentuating this word accepting it and accepting it. It's sort of like the Alice Walker, mother, you showed me your flaw. You
Yeah.
didn't hide it. That's your greatest gift to me.
Yeah.
That I can accept that you have that flaw, and
Yeah.
you sort of helped me know, you know. So on to James Joyce. He was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Wow. I saw this recent production of Antigone by Sophocles, and
Yeah.
I took a Zoom based class on Sophocles and those three Theban plays. At the same time, I was taking Shakespeare classes, and
Yeah.
so I'm not reading Shakespeare, shall we say, in translation. I'm reading Sophocles being translated, and then I saw how Sophocles or some translation of Sophocles must have affected Shakespeare, because I saw some of his stories directly in there. But that language that Sophocles, and he's my favorite playwright now, that he used was so clean and clear. It was just like, okay, draw up the lines. It doesn't make any difference what the thing was about. Okay, what soldier brother do you want to bury? Why is that of any importance? Because that's basically nonsense. Because it came out of a cultural thing for them. He just Antigone wanted to bury her brother. What and here we have Joyce talking about the fox. What was the fox burying his grandmother? Remember that, whatever that statement that
Yeah.
he makes about that, right?
Yeah.
So why do we need to see it from some great artist perspective in order to be able to see it in ourselves?
Yeah.
And because they're not talking about me. They're not saying, okay, Bill, what have you not buried? What are you burying? What are you not burying? What are you carrying? And what are you not carrying? They're not talking about any of that stuff. They're just saying, here's something that is so real, you can see it in yourself, that you
Yeah.
might not have been able to express it before.
Is that a universality, you mean? That what they're talking about is universal, that there's something. Is that what?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
sometimes because, like I'm limited to what I know to be able to interpret uh, Sophocles, for instance,
Right.
and or what some teacher says this is an important thing to understand about Sophocles, or what somebody who's really looked into Joyce said this is what's really important about what he meant here. So I'm limited to what's come into me or what I've from my past is what I've got universal enough to be able to respond to the universal that they're projecting.
That's good. So let's talk about intention in art. And, you can stay on Sophocles or you could go into James Joyce or whoever. But a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What do you think was the intention of Joyce writing? You can either go Finnegan's Wake or Ulysses or his writing. And how much did he get it? Did he just write, or did he know? One of my trick questions I asked Bill Kennedy, that is, how much of the wake did Joyce get? Did he understand? And then how much percentage do you get? You know, and so you can take it however you want, but it's sort of like this intention question in the creative process.
Joyce is really, I got to say, a bad one for this, Jerry, because he is so complex and deep, and
Yeah,
it's like constantly unwrapping another Christmas present.
yeah,
Almost every statement he makes, right?
yeah,
And so, one of the things that was wonderful about Joyce is that they're all gifts. Some of it I think he tried to explain, but so much of it he didn't.
yeah,
Let's just say he was doing kind of just writing out whatever came to his mind. And so I'm going to assume you meditate, just like I do, and that you've encountered those samadhi states,
yeah,
the eighth limb of yoga, or the samadhi state and that those are almost ineffable. Now you can describe
yeah,
some of the images that come, but so they're ineffable, and in some regards they're very much like LSD trips,
yeah,
or mescaline trips that I've had. Not the same. They come with a completely different kind of
yeah,
imagery, right? So,
yep,
but here's Joyce. Did he in Finnegan's Wake? Was he constantly in different samadhi states? Like, who's that? Dolly. Dolly would have this little
yeah,
thing tied to his finger that would wake him up, and then he'd try to draw what he was just moving into a dream state, right?
yeah,
So, did Joyce use those same kind of techniques to
yeah,
wake up and to write and here we have all those states of consciousness and awareness in our minds all the time, where we've got all the past, all the stuff we've ever read, all the things we've ever seen, etc., available. Puns, 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 and out
yeah.
it comes rolling. So, was his intention to do what? To show me the way that human brains work? If that was it, wow, I'm impressed.
That's a great explain. What is the wake's intention? To show us how human brains work. That's a neuroscientist. He was a social engineer. How brains work. That is brilliant. What you said, Bill, was amazing, because they asked Robert Frost, "Can you explain this poem?" And he said, "You mean you want me to say it worse?"
I love that. That's good.
That is really good. So here's a follow-up. Two of my film heroes, um, one says, "Ignore yourself." The other one says, "There is no self-expression." And then Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, "I'm just a vehicle, and this stuff just comes through me." So it's a stupid question, and I know it's both, and it depends, but just your hunch, is art making, writing, whatever, more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology, culture, environment is dominant presently in your time?
I probably ought not to even talk about this experience. I um, I had this experience when I was walking the Camino de Santiago de Compostela. It's an ancient Christian pilgrimage,
Yeah,
and I had the most common injury. And 3 weeks after uh, I had been treated for it, I walked, continued to walk. I took a course of steroids for a week, all that kind of stuff. And then one day I awakened, and all the pain that came with it was gone.
wow.
So I'm walking, I'm following a really good buddy of mine. We were walking together, and I'm following him. and we're walking at an early dawn, and this grove of eucalyptus trees, and I decided to close my eyes and just follow him. Now we'd never been on this path before, of course. We're just walking west across Spain.
But
And
are you touching his
no,
shirt or anything? But you feel that he's in front of you. You mean you literally closed your eyes and walked and trusted, but that he was gonna not let you fall over or something?
He didn't know I had done it.
Oh, you close your eyes without, you just felt you would feel his presence.
Yeah,
You
I
had
just closed my eyes, and because I
Yeah.
wasn't in pain at all. I had no suffering, and
Right.
I'd been given lots of thoughts to suffering and all that kind of stuff. And I disappeared.
While you were walking, your body,
I disappeared, and it all flowed through me, right? Just all flowed through me, and I don't usually talk about it much,
but how long did it go?
Not very long, because I thought, this is really dumb. I just got over a leg injury.
You could go off a cliff or something.
Well, I knew I wouldn't do that because I could hear him. I was keeping up with him. I could hear his boots.
That's what you had, some auditory sense.
Yeah. But I just disappeared, and it was absolutely the most beautiful moment I've ever experienced. So I realized I had entered a nirvanic state.
Yep.
That did not last, and because it lasted as long as I didn't have any fears and I did not intrude on it, right? Yeah. I can still feel that. I can still have this sense of it. It all just flowed. This thing just flowed through me. I have never tried to convey it in any kind of artistic expression because, again, most of these are ineffable. Yeah. For me, I have not got that capacity. So does the self disappear? Not entirely, I wouldn't think, in an artistic way. Enough of it disappears that they realize I'm a vehicle for what has come over me is not something that I intended. It came to me, and I'm going to deliver it. If you take Joyce now as the artist in question, because, is that what he did, the same kind of artistic expression that Picasso did with his melting clocks, his melting watches, etc.?
Yeah, you mean Dali with his
Dali? Yes, Dali. Thank you.
No, that's very interesting. Yeah, or any artist. Do they get
any artist, or or Michelangelo chipping away at something? Is somebody who's going to edit and re-edit and re-edit and re-edit and add in and take away and delete. Where is that part of the self disappearing?
Yeah.
And is it constantly reappearing and then disappearing and reappearing and disappearing? It's, again, those are one of those beyond my pay grade, because you take a filmmaker, I'm just a conventional guy. I like the Coen brothers. I like Robert Altman, they plan everything. They storyboard everything, as far as I can tell. They know they have layers that somebody's going to have to watch their stuff a lot of times, but then they also let the actors act and create in their own right. So at what point then, the director is the artist in a film, so when is their vision, and when do they just go with their instinct in the moment, and when do they retain that momentary instinct? How do they know that,
Yeah. No, that was a great answer, and I love you bringing up Altman, because I got to smoke a joint with him once.
Did you really?
Yeah. We were from University of Michigan. I went to Ann Arbor, and he's a very inspired filmmaker, and quite a character. But truly tapped into that. I mean, McCabe, Miss Miller, some of those films are amazing. But to go to Ohio. And just take one of the examples I use on that song is, on that question is, James Brown's drummer lived in Ohio, and there was a factory on one side of his house and a train track on the other.
Oh, yeah.
So how did he invent he was the architect for funk drumming. Boom, 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 boom. So all he was listening to the factory do this and the train track do that, and it came into his drumming.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then usually I follow it up as, can art making be egoless?
I don't know how a human being can be. I mean, let's pretend my ego disappeared. It did not disappear enough that I did not recount that to you.
Right. That's
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
So let's just say that when we treat the ego as just something bad, well, I don't really know enough about the ego to tell you whether it's bad or good, but I just know that everybody has one.
That's good. Because you know what? I asked a big Hollywood director at a screening of his film once. Uh, I set that question up sort of, and then I said, "Was Freud right?" And he said the same thing. He goes, "That's beyond my pay grade." But then later in the Q&A, he addressed it. At that point, he says, "That's beyond my pay grade," which I thought was funny. But I asked for 90 minutes and we only got 5 left. Can you go longer?
If you want me to.
Yeah, no, I'd love to, but I mean, just how can you go 10 minutes, 15 or 20? I mean,
how about 10 minutes? I was supposed to be at my sister-in-law.
Yeah.
She's making a special meal for me.
Great. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay, here's a few more. Is perception reality?
Let's talk about little r versus big R. And of course, it's not. It isn't. And but it is what I have to deal with. I mean, I do believe in the more I look into what I project onto what I see, my history and psychology and biology kind of directs my perception.
Yeah.
What I see.
Yeah. Lewis Carroll said, "I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Have you believed in anything impossible lately?
Oh yeah, of course.
What's one thing you believed in that's impossible?
I love NBA basketball, and my grandson loves NBA basketball too. So we both have this shared passion. I mean, and he's much quicker with the stats and everything, but the fantasy that I could have would be that I could play NBA basketball. And do I have those fantasies? Do I see myself taking a Steph Curry 3-pointer, from the mid-court and making it? Of course.
Nice. I like that. I play b-ball. I love b-ball. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness.
Yeah.
Tell me a weakness you morphed into you made a strength. Like how a breakdown you turned into a breakthrough, a rejection you turned into a redirection.
Yeah, I wish I did more of that, but I would say self-hatred has been really a good teacher for me, and to see it pop up in all of its different guises, and it's been really, really good.
It's been good because you have this self-hatred and you've used it to reflect on yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's also helped illuminate things that I can use to compensate for it at times. For instance, there was a point in my life there was no way I could ever be in something like this, which is a form of public speaking. Right. I used to hate the sound of my own voice and think it just conveys something that most people don't seem to hear it convey. But I would do things, and I'm a very low speaking person, but I've had to speak in front of sometimes hundreds of people, and I've used techniques knowing that I have this thing that I have to bring my voice into the room, shall we say. So I have found ways of doing that, and it's been very helpful. But there's a lot of other things that it's helped me with. Is that a good enough answer?
That's a great answer. It's like You nailed it. We're on live TV. This is worldwide live TV. We don't need a TV station in New York with the lights and cameras. It's really a phenomenal medium, and I really appreciate you being here. Uh, Anger can be a productive emotion when fill in the blank.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, it can motivate me to move out of, say, a natural tendency to become a victim or a martyr,
Yeah.
and just to stay in resentment. A lot of times people equate resentment as, suppressed anger, and I look at it as something else that's been suppressed. And anger helps me voice assertively what it is that I'm going to move into resentment about if I don't voice it.
Well done. Thanks, Bill. How do you find peace of mind?
Oh, internally meditation. Uh, a lot of my spiritual disciplines, if you will, and externally being with people I love. It's very helpful. But with that comes also encountering my own expectations of how they're going to be and all that other kind of stuff. So, then I have to do a constant, relational balancing act. But meditation used to be 15, 20 minutes a day. Those 15, 20 minutes a day lever everything.
Wow. But when did you discover it? How many years you've been meditating?
I've been meditating almost 34 years.
Wow, that is immense. How
Yeah.
did you learn of it? Did you just go, "Oh, I'll try this"? I mean, was there a specific story or route that got you there?
Yeah, the overall spiritual discipline I follow says that I have to find something that is a higher power for me, and that I have to pray and meditate, and that it can be anything I want it to be, but that I have to make conscious contact with it as often as possible. And so I started looking around. At the time, I didn't know anything about Christian meditation. I didn't know anything about really much about Buddhist meditation, but I know yogis did it. So I went and started meditating with yogis, and I had an almost immediate great happening in my life from it. But it's very difficult. I've had so many. It doesn't come natural to me. I'm more of I want to do stuff, so I had to dance is when I found out, oh, yeah, this is when I'm in the now. I'm in the now when I dance. But then I did all kinds of stuff like labyrinth walking and, studied Buddhist stuff. I have a Theravada monk who teaches me about meditation. That's only been in the last year. After meditating for 33 years, I learned enough to know that I needed help in order to improve. It's a monastic discipline, meditation. And
Yeah.
I'm not a natural monk. And
Yeah.
then I discovered, Christian meditation, because there's a lot of people that, follow the same spiritual program that I do. And a lot of them are Christians and they're not open to anything else. And so I had to look into, and I found Christian meditations. Christians have been meditating forever as monks.
Yeah.
And so it's been, a Trappist monk that brought it out into the 20th century. He discovered all these young Americans wanted to learn how to meditate, and these closing monasteries were being filled with yoga retreats and Buddhist retreats on the weekend. And so he said, hey, we do the same thing. And he's right. If you read The Cloud of Unknowing, it's
Yeah.
exactly the same described in there. It's hilarious. It was written in I think the 16th century by an anonymous British monk, and he's writing to a young novice about how to meditate.
Wow.
Hilarious stuff. But he nails techniques that are used by Zen and uh, Tibetan Buddhists. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Really well done. Thank you. It inspires me. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old,
Oh,
what would
wow.
you say to your 12-year-old self?
Hmm. It gets better.
Nice. That was brief. Keep that mentality. These are 5 Alan Watts questions just in a few words. Who started it all?
Oh, who says it ever started?
Very good. Are we going to make it?
I would say we already have.
Where do we put it?
Oh, among us. And it, for me, in this case, is love.
Yeah. Who's cleaning it up?
The future.
Is it serious?
If I take a weeping Buddhist perspective, that that weeping Buddha, the little doll you hold in your
Yeah.
hand, right? I would say it's the weight of that falls on my shoulders. If I take the Kuan Yin Bodhisattva perspective, the perceiver of the sounds of suffering, it's not serious. It's musing. It just is. It just happens.
Just is. I like that. And it's like Joyce, he changed the word laughter into laugh tears.
Tears. I like that about your website. Laugh
Right,
tears.
because he took the letters A and S and added them to laughter. And A and S is metaphor, and all language is metaphorical. So it's really
Wow.
deeper than just, blending two words.
Yeah.
Yeah, laugh tears is heavy. And that's the wake. You fall, then you get back up. It's redemption, right?
Yeah.
It's just this whole thing of getting. Which way should toilet? Just a couple more. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll? Over or under?
Over.
Why?
A buddy of mine, I had this conversation. He and I were absolute agreement. It comes off much easier if it's coming over.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had and I never want.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, plenty of things you can buy with money, like a Lamborghini.
Yeah. I get that a lot. Okay. Just a couple more. Thornton Wilder, who was a Wakean, said, art is confession. Art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Bill, you've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm grateful. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this. What's it really all about for you?
It being life.
Yep, you can put the it into the context you want, but you can
Yeah.
say it being life. Yeah.
Oh, I'd have to just say love again.
Yeah, that's good. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Hold my breath for a bit.
Oh, nice. That's practical. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Oh, yeah. I see some of these mega billionaires, Gates, Melinda Gates, um, the Yahoo that founded Amazon, and his wife, who's just trying to figure out how to give all of her money away.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, and trying to do as much good as he can with whatever it is. I mean, I just see a lot of these really much younger people trying to do wonderful things with their talents, and
Yeah.
those are just but there are so many young people doing wonderful things. Yeah.
Yeah. Bill, this has been truly enlightening. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
Um, well, it's all gotten better. I don't see why it should have to end.
That is great. What a way to end it. It's like I always say, well, I'm going to hit the end button now, but I hope our discussion never ends, that we'll keep going on and on. We got to have you back and we did have a whole salon on meditation or on Dante or on something. Again, this has really been fun. You really get what we're after. Sometimes we do these with multiple people too, like Duncan. We'd have Duncan, me, you, and you got to meet Sherry, who does the Carl Jung reading group. She's into Wake big time, and she's into Blake.
Oh yeah, Blake. Yeah,
Blake is great too.
yeah, yeah.
And thanks a lot, Bill. I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Jerry.
really
Namaste.
been fun.
Namaste, my brother.
Namaste. Yeah, namaste in bed. No, namaste. No, namaste in Zoom.
All right. How do I end this on my end?
You can't. It's on
Oh.
forever.